This is a Hawgs Sports Network podcast. You're listening to the Hawgs Illustrated Sports Club podcast. Here's your host, Chip Souza of the Hawgs Sports Network.
This is Chip Souza with Hawgs Sports Network. I'm here at the Hawgs Illustrated Sports Club luncheon. We had a great luncheon today. Raymond, former Razorback, was our guest speaker today. We also honored a couple of outstanding prep team and player of the week. Our prep program of the week was Fort Smith Southside, and we spoke with Coach Kim Dameron before today's luncheon. I'm talking with Kim Dameron, the football coach at Fort Smith Southside. Coach, you guys off to a great start.
We're excited about it. It's nice being 2-0, and we've played 2 games where offensively we've kind of exploded a little bit, and defensively we've actually been, I think, a little better or maybe a little further down the road than I thought we were, and so I'm excited about the prospects going forward.
Coach, your run game has been, you mentioned explosive. You had 2 backs over 100 yards last week. I think Gregory had 4 touchdowns. He was also involved a little bit in the passing game, too.
Yes.
What's it like to have that kind of 2-headed thunder and lightning kind of thing in the backfield for you?
Well, it's very good, and really it's 3 because our quarterback, Carter Zimmerman, also can run.
Okay.
And so he is kind of that third back in the backfield as far as our run game is concerned. I mean, we've had 2 backs over 100 yards 2 weeks in a row,
right.
1 over 200 2 weeks in a row, and then we've rushed for over 400 yards for 2 weeks in a row. So all that being said, everything is we're able to do that because of our offensive line, and that obviously starts with Kobe Branham, Arkansas commit. He plays right guard for us, and Cooper Anderson's our left tackle, and he's having a heck of a year so far, and we've got another kid, Connor McCoy, that plays right guard for us, left guard for us, and he's having a heck of a year so far. And so we're excited about where we are offensive line wise, and so if we can stay healthy and keep that bunch going, it really bodes well for us as far as those running backs are concerned.
Good deal. Okay, it's Kim Dameron, the football coach at Fort Smith Southside. They're off to a great 2-0 start. Coach, listen, good luck the rest of the season.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You bet. Talking with Bo Williams, the Prep Rally Player of the Week. Bo, 45 carries, 400 yards. That's something you probably never think. You never think you're going to get 400 yards in a game or 45 carries in a game.
I wouldn't say the 400-yard part because, I do have a lot of faith in myself and in this group of linemen, man. They are killer, man. They're one of the best lines in the state. But, the 45 carries definitely was a surprise to me.
Your quarterback went out early in the game. I'm guessing that kind of changed the game plan a little bit and put a little bit more, we're going to have more emphasis on the run game.
Yes, sir.
I'm guessing that's what it was.
Yeah, Coach Barner came up to me after Cole got hurt, and he was like, hey, I'm going to need you to start, hydrating a little bit better and sitting down in between plays and not using too much energy because, we're about to feed you this thing. And, so that we kind of gathered around, got the linemen in, and we were like, hey, guys, we're about to run the rock the rest of this game. So the linemen were ready for it. I was ready for it. Everybody was. So, and that was kind of the result of it.
We talked a little bit in the luncheon today. Last year they came up here, beat you guys pretty good. I'm guessing you guys had this game circled on your calendar for a while.
Oh, for sure. That loss last year was very embarrassing to us, having Sam Pittman on the sideline, all these news teams covering it, and thousands of people at the game, and getting beat the way we got beat was not ideal. So all offseason that's been on our mind. That in the state game against Parkview, but it's been circled for sure for a very long time. Every weight room session, every sprint, every 7-on-7 tournament, all the work has been, hey, let's beat Little Rock Christian September 1st. So,
what's it like for you guys having Tucker Barnard back? He's a guy that you were probably just a little guy when he was here before, but having somebody who knows the shallow culture, has been, was involved in a lot of success in the program. How important was that for you guys to get a quote unquote shallow guy?
Yeah, I'm really happy I get Coach Barnard for this 1 year. I wish I had him for a couple more, but glad I could spend this year with him. And I think he has that rough nose, he's not afraid to get in it and hit people and be fierce about it, you know what I mean? And so I feel like that culture really fits our team this year, all these guys aren't really afraid of anybody and are not afraid to hit. So, that kind of culture that he brought, really helps.
Good deal. That is Bo Williams, the Player of the Week this week, the Prep Raleigh Player of the Week. Bo, congratulations
Appreciate
and good luck the rest of the season.
Yes, sir. I really appreciate it.
One of the things that I thought was interesting, I have every football media guide with the exception of 1 year going back to like 1992. And sometimes I wonder, why do I have them? And then I think when I'm about to interview you, it helped because I was able to go find out a lot about you. One of the things that I thought was interesting as I was looking through your bio is that your dad went to Little Rock Central with Houston Nutt. Were they teammates there? Did they just know each other?
They knew each other, were familiar with each other. Okay. It was actually, it wasn't high school, Little Rock Central High School. They actually went to junior high together at the time, and they were teammates there in junior high. So knew of each other, but not necessarily super familiar. But when Coach Nutt coming to the house, he had some memories and he had some stories to tell for sure.
It seems like tell me about him recruiting you, because he was hired early December of 1997. You've got 2.5 months, if that, until signing day. What were your thoughts on this guy coming in? Because I'm sure it was a bundle of energy.
Yeah, well, he definitely changed the dynamic of how the recruiting process was going for me. And I was considered a late bloomer from a high school development perspective, and really didn't get much notoriety until about midway through my senior year. It was actually a game playing against Fort Smith Southside. It was actually one of the games that was reflected on transitional for me. Southside, those were some of the glory, the bigger, more successful years of Southside football, and we just so happened to play an away game there, and we didn't fare well as far as the scoreboard was concerned, but I was fortunate enough to be able to have a pretty decent game individually. But Coach Nutt definitely made a point to know that you were wanted, and that he really was excited about. If he came to see you, he was excited about you, and he was there for a reason. And it was a pretty contrast from the previous experience I had with recruiting. At the university at the time, because I went in and the previous head coach didn't know who my name was when I first met him. So that was definitely a different experience. He was definitely difference making the things that he did from a recruiting perspective.
So you chose Arkansas. Were there other teams that you were thinking about going?
Yeah. The Final Four schools that I chose, it was Arkansas as well. Ole Miss at the time was also in the mix. Oklahoma State was another school that I took in consideration, and then Rice University that was my mom's favorite school. Rice University, Ken Hatfield at the time was the head coach there. She really loved Ken, and he definitely made a positive impression on her. But it was a little far for her too, though, so it all worked out.
Chip mentioned this 98 documentary on the football team, and tomorrow night they're having some sort of special screening of it. They're going to have a lot of former players back tomorrow. Houston Nutt's in town. He's going to be inducted into the UA Hall of Honor this weekend. There was a clip that was on social media, I think may have been put on there this morning, and it's Bo Mattingly interviewing Houston. They're in the locker room, and he talks about this moment at the beginning of that season where he had everybody put their hand on a helmet, and they dedicated the season to each other. And it was an awesome clip. I found myself watching this, and for the minute and a half, minute 40, whatever it was, the clip was, you're just kind of captivated by what he's saying. And Houston's so good about grabbing a room and grabbing your attention. What do you remember though about that moment?
Yeah, again, it kind of goes back to the earlier point that I made about the surrealness of the things that you're a part of, and not realizing how epic of a moment it is when you're in that moment. But individually, we knew that it was a shift, and things were going to be different from that point moving forward, because there was an outward showing of a commitment to each other for the success of the team as a whole, and it came away from, again, the things that were being pointed individually, and nobody in that moment wanted to let anyone else in that room down, and so to be able to take that and have that many of college-age kids take that to heart and be able to commit to it. He was one of those ones where you knew no matter, there's a lot of that can be said about strategy and and X's and O's, but there's something to be said about the commitment of those players to collectively as a team and being able to go out with a united front. And I think he knew that that's what we needed to have success, and that was definitely what the result was.
You talk real fondly about playing for him. Time has been really kind to him. I mean, his tenure is remembered really well. That's got to feel pretty good for you and your teammates who played with him, and I got to feel like you guys are pretty ecstatic to see him get this Hall of Honor.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's well deserved and long overdue. The recognition that he's receiving in the annals of annals of history for Razorback football, but again, I think it was a shift, and I think that was a big part of the expectations around Razorback football changing as well too. When you think about that era, and that was not only outside but inside as well too, right? We expected to have winning seasons. We expected to go bowl games. We expected to compete in those higher level games. We expected to, in those certain situations, like in the conversation when it comes to championships, and so that was definitely different than what things had been before at that point.
There's a lot of talk about Little Rock this week. I mean, we were just talking about Little Rock Christian playing Shiloh the other night. Let's start with War Memorial because that's something that everybody wants to talk about. It's you grew up down there. I'm sure you're pretty partial to those games, but what are your thoughts on War Memorial and kind of what it has become, what it means, what the future is there?
Well, lots of good memories. For me personally, when I think about playing in War Memorial. Miracle Markham was during my senior year. It was the last game I played, regular season game I played that year as well too. So I'm partial from a historical perspective. There's a penchant, and there's kind of a sentiment that the atmosphere and the excitement that it used to create is not one that they have anymore. And I get these the thoughts around Arkansas being the flagship university and being there for the entire state. And I think there's some things that you can do to engage Central Arkansas without it specifically being a cyclical game. To be able to appease the masses there and making sure that Arkansas still maintains its level of influence and impact throughout the entire state.
And you came from a Little Rock public school, and you look at Arkansas for years when they were really good, they were getting players from Parkview and Central. I mean, those were kind of the backbones of their team. Do you see, is Little Rock still putting out the same number of recruits that they used to? Because they're not coming from the public schools anymore. But then you got Walker White's committed to Auburn. He goes to Little Rock Christian. You've got CAC's quarterback is committed to play at Arkansas. Do you think maybe it's just the private school element has maybe reallocated where players are coming from?
Well, I think that you look at a lot of different factors that's there. In the information age, the world is a lot smaller as well too, and sports is not immune to that as well. So a lot of different pieces of information, a lot of access. Coaches from around the country, have readily made access to players and their information and what they look like and all those things from a recruiting perspective. So there's a lot. So with that being said, a lot more options, right? So you think about the recruiting landscape, high school to college. Those are one of the things that what impacts it. But also too, you just think about the dynamics socioeconomically within the city of Little Rock, and you do kind of have some flight from the city, and you have some movement to your neighboring schools, and because there's also the opportunity as well too. Right? And originally, Little Rock only having 4 or 5 public high schools, and being able to have injected some opportunities there. With knowing that there's more increasing talent, so you'll see some exoduses to Jacksonville, to North Little Rock, to Bryant, most notably when you think about a lot of those guys that are from the city that are there as well.
Okay, now I think Raymond is the only person in here who's got his own IMDb page. Tell us about this.
Yeah, I do. I am heavily involved in music and arts, drama specifically. So I'm a member of St. James Baptist Church here in Fayetteville, and so I lead and direct drama ministry there. But also in part of that too, I do some acting as well too. And most recently, the role I played in was the role of a minister in the movie just released, God's Country Song, that's currently streaming on PureFlix. So, which is kind of ironic too. Being a son of a preacher, it's pretty full circle to kind of be in a role like that and kind of be in those spaces.
Just as an aside, you mentioned you go to St. James. I keep getting these emails from someone at BYU because they're coming here next week. Did any of you go to the game in Provo last year? If you went, if you're in the visiting section, they give you ice cream in the middle of the game. It's like they're all about hospitality, and so they're also about hospitality when they go on the road. And one of the things that they are doing, they don't tailgate like most fan bases do. They actually, it's really cool. They actually are bringing 40,000 pounds of food that they are donating to the St. James Food Bank, as well as they're bringing diapers. They're bringing all kinds of things that you can give back to the community. So it's a really neat deal. That's just kind of as an aside that I thought of, as you said, St. James. You mentioned your music. I've got written Third House. Is that what you're known as?
Yes. Yeah, that's a creative hub that I've had for the better part of 15 years, and because a lot of the things, both musically and acting as well, kind of roll within that as well too. I've done some music production for individual artists, but in here most recently, film scoring for small independent filmmakers in the area as well too. So just another creative release that I have.
You were brought up musically, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you came to college knowing how to play multiple instruments.
Yeah. I grew. I mentioned earlier, being the son of a preacher, you're gonna spend a lot of time around the church, and so how do you occupy yourself? You had to figure that out. So being a part of church bands growing up, that was a big influence in me. So and then now even with my kids, my oldest is in the band, and our middle child is in the orchestra too. So quite several random instruments in and around our house right now too. So
you mentioned Miracle on Markham. You played in an SEC championship game. It didn't go your way, but you still got to play in it. What are those the games that stand out to you? What are your favorite memories as a Razorback?
Yeah, those are definitely great experiences. I think about probably Boise State the second year we played them. I believe that was in the year 2000. That's one stands out because that was the first game I actually played in. Okay. Early a season opener non-conference game. But also obviously Miracle Markham SEC championship, 7 overtimes in Ole Miss. So that was at the time longest game in college history. So that was definitely a big one that stands out as well too. So.
Two things that stood out to me from reading your bio in the media guide. You said if there was a stadium other than Fayetteville you couldn't play in, you'd love to play in Neyland Stadium in Tennessee. What was it about that place that stood out to you?
It gave me feels of the Roman Coliseum. We think about it in ancient times. That's how it was just massive, and that many, largest crowd I ever played in front of when I think about my career. I can't remember who it was, but we had a freshman that was there. I can't remember who it was. I wish I did. I remember there was a couple of them too that actually complained of headaches because they had never heard anything as loud as being in there. You think about some kids that come from, they may not play in front of more than maybe a couple of hundred people, throughout their career, and they go from that to 106,000. It's a bit of a contrast in volume for sure.
I don't know if you can take this as gospel truth, but Frank Broyles said that there was one game they played there one time. They played Rocky. He said he counted it. They played Rocky Top 35 times. In the
absolutely. At least that was something they wore out. That's part of their culture there for sure.
Bobby Allen said something too about you. He said that you were a coach's dream. He was one of your position coaches at the U of A. What made you that way?
Well, I'm humbled by that, Coach Allen. It was definitely a good one. Him having as my position coach and also as a coordinator was definitely a great experience. I think about just from an individual player perspective, I wanted to make sure that I did what I could and try to be. It's funny because I think about the lessons that my dad taught me, and then I try to impart with to my kids to be a good listener, make good choices, do your best, right? It's super simple, right? But just the general application of that, even as an adult. And then when I think about back then, just that was kind of the approach I tried to take. I just try to listen and make the right choices in the moments that I had to make those, and in anything I was doing, do my best, And it's amazing. Again, something that's transferable from a work perspective too. Just trying to be somebody that listens at work and be easy to work with and do the best that you can.
Did you watch the game Saturday?
I did.
What were your thoughts?
I thought it was a good game. You can't complain much about 43-point win, and so I thought they executed well. Surprisingly more so offensively, given. You think about a team in transition, the impacts of the transfer portal, but also, replacing an offensive and a defensive coordinator, a lot of change, and then, that change management portion of it, I think, is something that, is overlooked from a coaching perspective, because there's that kind of sits outside of just the strategy and the X and O's and recruiting and getting the right players. Is how do we shift from what we were doing before to what we're doing now? And I thought from a game one perspective, they did well. You'd like to see more dominance from a run game perspective, but I believe those are things that, as they again mature and gel more within those units, to be able to do that. Being biased, being a former lineman, I think the season's going to be predicated by the success and the failure is going to be predicated by how the offensive and defensive line imposes their will on opposing teams, because I think. You think about having that protection for KJ and then being able to have some of your young playmakers be able to roam the back half, knowing that, if you have an offensive lineman that can win one-on-ones, when you have a defensive lineman that can demand a double team, that changes how the approach to the game is.
Defensive line in particular, they look big. This is the biggest group of defensive linemen I can remember in some time, maybe ever. Do you watch them closely? And if so, maybe give us your analysis of how they played.
I thought it's solid. Still looking. I still think that there needs to be an establishment of that one or two handful of players, both either inside or outside, that forces the hand of the offense to be able to change things. Because that's when you think about your championship teams, usually at each of those position groups, you have at least one. Player that really changes how the other team makes the approach to what their strategy is going in. And I think there's still some time left for that, who that's going to be out of that unit to establish that. Whether it's some of your guys that have been there, or some of your newcomers within from the transfer play. But you can tell the talent and the ability is there, and you see flashes of it. But having that consistency, throughout 60 minutes, and making sure that as you rotate, there's no drop off, and there's still that disruptiveness that you need on defense, especially up front. I think it's something that we'll be looking forward to for them to develop as the season goes on.
Last one for you. Best player you played with, best player you played against.
So, it's interesting to put it, because the best players that probably, when I think about it, and this is coming within the resurgence of the SEC as well too, and really being on the first, the precipice of them having dominance throughout college football as a whole. I didn't play against much better players. When I think directly being defensive lineman, thinking about playing against offensive linemen, I didn't play against much better players than the ones that I faced in practice every single day. When you think about me being a true freshman and lining up across from Brandon Burlsworth, and then you had Bobby Williams, and you think about the later years, Sean Andrews, Jason Peters, Tony Hugo. These are guys that that were all SEC caliber, and there was not a lot better than those guys. And so that's funny, because I've had that question asked before, and it's like I never saw any guys better, better than any of those guys I faced against in week in and week out. And I think that internal competition was a big portion of why we had the success within those years too.
Raymond, we appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Give Raymond a hand. All right. Thank you.
So that wraps up this edition of the Hawgs Illustrated Sports Club podcast, and we'll be back next week, in which Fitz Hill, the former Arkansas Razorback coach, will be the guest speaker, and he should bring a good message next week. So until next time, this is Chip Sousa for the Hawgs Sports Network. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
The proceeding has been a production of the Hawgs Sports Network. Look for our daily podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. For more Razorbacks coverage, go to WholeHogSports.com or follow the Hawgs Sports Network reporters on social media.